Hi everyone, I'm Rob Shapiro from Fitchburg State University, and this is the BACB's 5th edition task list, item G-15, use extinction. So what is extinction? Extinction is a behavior reduction procedure in which reinforcement is withheld for a previously reinforced response. Sometimes this is referred to as operant extinction, as differentiated from respondent extinction. And down the road, we'll get into the difference between the two of those. But for our purposes, we can just call it extinction. But in general, in applied behavior analysis, when we're talking about extinction, we're specifically talking about operant extinction. And extinction differs from negative punishment, another behavior reduction procedure, because the reinforcing stimulus is withheld in extinction and is withdrawn in negative punishment. Okay, that's a really important distinction when we're trying to determine what kind of procedure we have in place. With extinction, the reinforcer is not present and is not being delivered, the behavior is engaged in, and the reinforcer continues to not be delivered. In negative punishment, the reinforcing stimulus is present in the environment, the target behavior occurs, and that reinforcing stimulus is withdrawn from the environment. Okay, so again, with extinction, wasn't there before the behavior, it's still not there after the behavior. Negative punishment, it is there before the behavior, and it's withdrawn following the behavior. And extinction is determined by the function of the behavior targeted for reduction. We can have extinction of behavior maintained by positive reinforcement, we can have extinction of behavior maintained by negative reinforcement, and we can have extinction of behavior that's maintained by automatic reinforcement. So for extinction of behavior that's maintained by positive reinforcement, this occurs when the behavior that had been previously reinforced by the delivery of a stimulus no longer results in the delivery of that stimulus. And that stimulus could be attention, it could be a tangible, it could be an activity, basically anything that gets delivered or added to the environment following the behavior. If we stop adding that to the environment following the behavior, we're attempting an extinction procedure. Over time, the behavior decreases in frequency since it is no longer followed by reinforcement. Now, extinction of behavior maintained by negative reinforcement occurs when the behavior that had been previously reinforced by the removal of a stimulus or escape no longer results in the removal of that stimulus. And this could be the removal of a demand, or it could be the removal of an aversive stimulus that's present in the environment. Sometimes we call this escape extinction because basically we've got a situation where previously there was some behavior that was engaged in that resulted in the removal of the demand or the removal of the aversive stimulus, basically allowed the organism to escape that situation. But now when the behavior is engaged in, that removal no longer occurs. Okay, so it's no longer being negatively reinforced. And again, over time, the behavior decreases in frequency since it no longer is followed by the removal of the aversive stimulus or demand. Finally, we've got extinction of behavior maintained by automatic reinforcement. And this occurs when the behavior that had been previously reinforced by the sensory consequences of that behavior no longer result in those sensory consequences. It's important to remember with automatic reinforcement that these sensory consequences are not delivered by the social environment. They're things that occur as an automatic outcome of the behavior. So we can take, for example, if you have someone who engages in a finger tapping behavior, right? And we determine that the function of that behavior is actually the sound of that tapping. That sound is reinforcing. It's automatically reinforcing because a natural byproduct of that tapping is the noise that's being made, okay? And let's say that we wanted to place that behavior on sensory extinction. If we put something soft on the cover of the book, in this case I just opened up the book, but if we put something soft there, and then the tapping happens, and now the sound is no longer being made. The behavior is still occurring, but the automatic reinforcement is no longer being delivered. And so over time, that behavior is going to decrease in frequency since it's no longer followed by that sensory consequence. There are a number of secondary effects of extinction, regardless of the extinction procedure that we're using, that need to be considered when we're thinking about implementing an extinction procedure. The first is this concept of the extinction burst. And an extinction burst is when immediately following the implementation of an extinction procedure, the target behavior may happen more. So in those first few sessions after implementing an extinction procedure, you actually see an increase in the frequency of that target behavior. Extinction burst is one of these really commonly misused terms. Sometimes people refer to any time problem behavior increases as an extinction burst. Not really true. Only if there's been an extinction procedure put in place do we have an extinction burst. Okay. Also, it's really important that we're specifically talking here about an increase in frequency. Okay. It's that the target behavior happens more. There are some other things that share some similarities to the extinction burst, but actually are different secondary effects of extinction. One of those is extinction-induced variability. And this is where the target behavior may change in topography or other non-preferred behaviors may emerge. This can include things like emotional outbursts and even aggression. So this is where the behavior that was previously being reinforced is no longer being reinforced, and so the learner starts to engage in other behaviors, very often non-preferred behaviors, sometimes more intense or problematic than what the initial behavior that was targeted for extinction was. Similarly, we may see an increase in response magnitude. And this is where, as it sounds like, the target behavior might become more intense initially. Right? So if we think about a behavior such as head hitting, right? We can have an extinction burst where, so if the target behavior is happening a certain amount, we put our extinction procedure in place, and that head hitting starts happening more, we've got an extinction burst, right? But now let's say in addition to it happening more, we have the head hitting happening harder. The person's hitting themselves more strongly. That's not an extinction burst, that's an increase in response magnitude. Clearly related, clearly similar, but it's a different phenomenon. And then finally, we have the possibility of spontaneous recovery. And this is one that, as opposed to the other three, which really tend to take place in the immediate aftermath of implementing an extinction procedure, spontaneous recovery tends to occur down the road. This is after an extinction procedure has had an opportunity to take hold and behavior has dropped to near zero rates, sometimes for no readily apparent reason. We may see a brief reemergence of that behavior. And if that behavior continues to not be reinforced, it typically goes away relatively quickly. But if we're not being careful and we accidentally reinforce that behavior that we had previously put on extinction, we can end up with a problem in our hands. We can end up with that behavior starting to happen more again. So, how do we go about using extinction effectively? First of all, we need to make sure that we can withhold all reinforcers that are maintaining the problem behavior. Again, extinction is about withholding reinforcement for a previously reinforced response. So unless we can consistently withhold all reinforcers for a problem behavior, that behavior is going to continue to be reinforced, and it's going to be likely to continue to occur. So in addition to withholding all reinforcers maintaining the problem behavior, we have to make sure that we hold that reinforcement consistently. We have to withhold it every single time the target behavior happens. And this is so that we avoid accidentally reinforcing the behavior on a more lean and variable schedule of reinforcement, which actually serves to make behavior more robust and more resistant to extinction. We want to combine extinction with other procedures to help mitigate the side effects of extinction. So again, we have the possibility of an extinction burst, of a shift in topography, an increase in magnitude, all of these potentially really problematic things. But if we combine extinction with other procedures, like let's say teaching a replacement behavior that we then reinforce, that makes reinforcement still readily available and may reduce some of those side effects of extinction. We can also use instructions. Sometimes by describing the procedure that we're going to implement to the learner, it can expedite the process. So sometimes rather than just, let's say, for example, we think someone's behavior is maintained by attention, rather than just deciding to ourselves, I'm not going to give this person any attention when they engage in that behavior. If we let them know ahead of time, listen, when you engage in that behavior, I'm not going to give you attention for that anymore. That may help expedite the process by making the rule explicit for the learner. And then finally, we want to make sure that we're planning for extinction-induced aggression, as well as all side effects that may jeopardize the implementation of the procedure. It can be really intense when someone engages in extinction-induced aggression. The extinction burst can be really difficult to manage and to see through, as well as the potential increase in intensity or the shift in topography. Those things can be really tough to see through and continue to implement our extinction procedure. So we need to make sure that we're aware that those things are possibilities and that we have a plan for them. And frankly, that we don't go down the road of trying to implement an extinction procedure unless we're confident that we're going to be able to see that procedure through, even in the face of the side effects that we may come up against. It's also important to note that there are some cases where extinction may be contraindicated. This is a somewhat restrictive procedure, and there are times when it would not be warranted to use an extinction procedure. So first of all, when the behavior is harmful, either to the person engaging in the behavior or to others, it may not be appropriate to use extinction. Because if we think about this, with extinction, if someone's likely to engage or to experience an extinction burst, an increase in frequency of the behavior, or an increase in the intensity of the behavior, it can be really problematic to use an extinction procedure with a harmful behavior if the possibility exists that it might happen more or more intensely, even in the short term. Extinction may also be contraindicated when we can't consistently withhold reinforcement from all sources. So if we go back to the example where we decide that we're going to stop providing attention when some target behavior happens, but the target's behavior is happening in a classroom, and we know that we can't reliably count on the other students in the classroom to not attend to that behavior, we're not likely to have an effective extinction procedure, and so it may be contraindicated in that situation. Extinction may also be contraindicated when a rapid reduction in problem behavior is required, because again, we're likely to see a temporary increase. It's going to take a little while before we see that decrease in problem behavior. So if it's really critical that we get a rapid reduction in that problem behavior, we probably don't want to be looking at an extinction procedure. And then finally, if there are other people that are present and are likely to imitate the behavior, again, because the behavior is likely to happen more and to happen more intensely in the short term, if we're concerned that there are other people who may imitate that behavior, we may want to consider a different intervention that's not going to result in that behavior happening a lot. So then in closing, we've been talking about operant extinction, where reinforcement is withheld for a previously reinforced response, but we started this talk contrasting operant and respondent extinction. So it's worth talking about respondent extinction just for a moment here. Again, the vast majority of the time when we talk about extinction in applied behavior analysis, we're talking about operant extinction, but there is a place for considering respondent extinction as well. So again, with operant extinction, reinforcement is withheld for a previously reinforced response. Respondent extinction, on the other hand, is about stimulus-stimulus pairing. So this is where you have two stimuli that had been previously paired, such as a conditioned reinforcer that gains its power by being paired with other reinforcers, or a conditioned stimulus in respondent conditioning, which would be a neutral stimulus that gains its power by being paired with an unconditioned stimulus. Respondent extinction is when these things are unpaired over time. And as a result, the conditioned reinforcer loses its reinforcing properties, or the conditioned stimulus loses its ability to elicit the conditioned response. So when we're looking to tease out the distinction here, and when we're looking to determine what kind of extinction am I seeing here? Am I seeing respondent extinction, or am I seeing operant extinction? Respondent extinction is related to stimulus-stimulus pairing. It's all about two antecedents that are paired and then are unpaired in the extinction process, whereas operant extinction is related to response-stimulus relationships or consequence relationships. And here we have a case where behavior becomes less likely to happen because we break that pairing between a response being followed by reinforcement. So again, if we're looking to tease out the difference, respondent is all about antecedent pairing, operant is about consequence pairing.